cartoons from present and the past. Every week will be an animated bash. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! Maybe a short but mostly shows. We'll talk, we'll analyze, exploring as we go. What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon! What a cartoon!
Hello, everybody, and welcome to What a Cartoon, where we don't drink the water. I'm your host, the sensitive about his haircut, Bob Mackey, and this is an audio exploration of every cartoon ever. Who is here with me today?
Henry Gilbert, and I hate touching reptiles.
And who is on the line with us?
I'm Wooly, and I like an anime or two.
And today's episodes are the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 4 episodes 1 and 2. And yes, we are doing the epic, long-running JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, a 30-year running manga. Had an OVA in the past, and now they're just getting through all of the manga content with anime series in this decade. But before we continue, we have a special guest on the line, Wooly. In case some of our listeners don't know what you do, can you explain who you are and what you're a part of?
My name is Wooly. I'm a part of Super Best Friends Play and Wooly Versus. Those are two YouTube channels that we basically play video games. We make jokes. And occasionally I do a podcast called the Super Best Friend Cast as well.
And you're a big-time JoJo expert as well, I
yes.
would say.
I mean, I don't like to claim that I am a JoJo expert. I just am somebody who has, consumed some of that storytelling and has appreciated it, is all.
I really love the stuff you guys do at Super Best Friends and on your solo channel. Like the Kirby Prepare to High was really great that you did recently. And also, and the Tokyo Mirage sessions. Like I played that game. I reviewed it. It was one of my last freelance reviews as a games press person. And seeing you guys go through it, it reminded me what I loved about it and also what took a long time with it as well.
Yeah, that was. I'm surprised you caught that. That was a bad decision. That was still fun. It's like a really slow train wreck where you get to appreciate the view.
Would you recommend that over Persona 5? I haven't played either yet. I know we're getting slightly off topic here.
You might want to play Persona 5.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe play that one instead.
One of these days, I will clear out 120 hours of my schedule for one of those games.
Once you finish Dragon Quest.
Yes. Yes, we're talking about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. I am but a JoJo neophyte. I've been always kind of aware of it because it's been doing its thing before I became an anime fan. So I always kind of knew what it was. To me, it was like an OVA series, a weird Dreamcast game I didn't understand. And only in the recent decade did they start making it an anime series again. And this is my first dealing with it. For all your listeners out there, if you want to watch it, it's on Crunchyroll, but it's not labeled as Part 4. You have to go to episode 75 of the Crunchyroll run in order to find it. So please don't start with the first and second episodes you find on Crunchyroll or any other streaming service, because that is Part 2?
Season 1 is 1 and 2. Yeah.
If you do look on Crunchyroll under JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Diamond is Unbreakable, it is labeled 1 and up.
Okay.
So you just have to kind of go to that section.
It's not as user-friendly as it could be, but I did find it. I just want to let everyone know it is out there on Crunchyroll. I don't know if it's anywhere else.
It's on Hulu as well.
Okay, cool.
It's subbed, and the dub actually just started on Adult Swim. So
yeah.
If you have Adult Swim, you can watch the dub instead.
Yeah. Although you gotta put the disclaimer that if you do decide to start at Part 4, you're starting at Part 4. You know what I mean?
Well,
keep that in mind. You're kind of missing.
I didn't have time to watch. Sorry, I didn't have time to watch 74 episodes. I wanted to. I swear. After I watched these two, I was like, oh, I have so much to catch up on. So yeah, but I really enjoyed it.
I'm relatively new to JoJo. I've been hearing about from I am a weeb, but everybody was telling me, oh, get into JoJo, but at least in the United States, it was not legally available too many places, and the effort to read it just seems so daunting. I was like, I don't want to put the effort into reading it. I have a million other manga I want to read instead. And and the OVA's presentation localized was also very confusing to me on the outside of the OVAs that were the second half of Part 3, but in 7 episodes. It was just all very confusing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the OVAs, we don't really talk about those so much anymore. They're great in the sense that some of the art direction was handled by Satoshi Kon, and He was brilliant. So like they OVAs brought some interesting stuff, but ultimately Araki, the creator himself, didn't really like much of the JoJo adaptation up until this new series started. So you could pretty much forget everything else besides this series. And, you know, thankfully, it was kind of rough early on being a fan because a lot of JoJo, you had to scrounge around the internet, find some scans here, get a little translation there. I remember back when I started, like someone on a forum was making personal translations for just that forum.
Wow.
Yeah, but it's a really cool story that's worth it, and there's a reason why it kind of people knew what it was even before it became available. But thankfully now with Crunchyroll, you can, if you feel like it, start diving in. I would recommend from the start, but you can sample a little bit later in the other seasons and see if you like the weirdness that JoJo brings.
Yeah, I picked part 4 to be the episodes we start with just because if we start with just part 1, the episode 1, it's just all the Jonathan Joestar stuff, which is, I'm not bagging on it, but it is a more straightforward action manga. You don't really get the weirdness. There's no stands. This at least lets you have a taste of like the strangeness and the bizarreness of JoJo.
Yeah, the parts are the course of it's a man discovering himself. Like Araki, the creator, is figuring out everything about himself over the course of like however 30 years or so that this has been running. And part 1 really just like rolls down to like it's a vampire story. It's like like that's all it really is. But like there's a little bit of weirdness here and there, and I feel like with each one, the genre, the subgenre I should say, changes. You get to see same name carry over and the same family legacy throughout the years like evolve, and it is a lot, but there's a really fun continuity to it. And if you like to get lost in like world building and I guess timeline building, I don't think anything does it better than the world of JoJo.
Yeah, this author seems to have developed his own universe in that he can tell any sort of shonen story and can kind of change the rules as things go on based on what Henry has told me about the past series of this.
He can. And the best part about it is that when the current story is done and the characters are done, you can then close it, bookend it, and move on. And you don't have to like stretch or really fill for time like a lot of other shonens need to, because you can just move the camera to another part of the world, another character, another relative, and focus on that instead.
Yeah, like for comparison, and say Dragon Ball, which I love Dragon Ball, the entire all 42 volumes of it. But in Dragon Ball, he has to reset so many times with like, now Goku is facing this and there's a whole new power, and it has to like recontextualize a ton of stuff and introduce a ton of new stuff, but still keep Goku at the center. In this, like when a part ends, the camera just pulls away and then it goes, that guy's story is over and he's going to go to a new guy.
42 volumes of Dragon Ball, what a weakling. This guy has made 120 volumes of JoJo to date. That's incredible. Maybe Wooly can tell us, I'm sure we'll get into that in the history, how much of that has been translated? Have all of those volumes made it over here in some way?
No.
No?
Well, I mean, in official capacity,
yeah, I'm just
certainly
curious.
Not.
Some of them are in my Viz app.
Not. In an unofficial capacity, people are as far as part 8. So you can go pretty current if you want to absorb all of it.
I know things like One Piece and Detective Conan, they keep on track with the Japanese releases, the digital releases, but I didn't know if the JoJo was the same way.
Not in the United States. Viz has it both for the anime and for the manga. And the manga, I think they are releasing them in these really good black and white hardcovers, like high quality collections, but they're only into part 3 right now of it. So they've got a ways to go.
Yeah, it's going to take a while to get there, but the fan base is kind of doing they're finding their own way, if you would, to consume that content.
So I guess with the history, let's start from the beginning there, that Hirohiko Araki was born June 7th, 1960, though people say he's a vampire because he just looks ageless for the last 30 years.
Oh my God.
He's
absolutely.
He's a real Sakurai figure, Nintendo's Sakurai.
Yeah, him and Sakurai have a lot in common. Araki, he loves drawing, he loves high fashion, and he loves Western rock and roll. And he had a real quick ascendancy as a mangaka with a popular series in Shonen Jump called Bao, which then on December, that ended, and then December 2nd, 1986, would see the launch of his masterpiece, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, aka JoJo no Kimyo no Boken, which starred a British fancy lad named Jonathan Joestar learning to be a kung fu badass and fighting vampires. And that was cool enough on its own, but when you see it like next to the then current like Fist of the North Star, you can definitely see the influence there. Like Jonathan Joestar and Kenshiro have a lot of similar features, but the real draw in part one is the pretty boy antagonist Dio Brando, who is this vampire rock star. He is so cool.
I'd call that an understatement of a comparison to Kenshiro. He's deadlifted from him. Like,
Yeah.
there's very little else.
I want it to be nice, but yeah, he's just Kenshiro. Which is why a year into the run, Araki makes the wild move that you never would see in a popular Shonen Jump comic, at the very least, of killing off Jonathan Joestar and then moving forward in time 50 years and starring Jonathan's grandson, Joseph, in the 1930s, who would then have a much more like exciting adventure fighting really first vampires and then like Greek gods, I guess you'd call them.
Pillar Man.
The Pillar Man. Yes.
I assume people were on board with it because it continued, but I really like to know what people thought of that move at the time. Maybe it was just so audacious. They were like, well, let's keep reading.
See where it goes.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I feel like every time someone gets excitement from a franchise moving forward in time, like seeing, the same world, the same familiar things, but just a little bit different. Think about how people enjoy Creed now after knowing Rocky for so long.
yeah.
Every new part of JoJo brings that excitement.
Yeah, it is.
Comparison.
They bring in all this old continuity that then you get to appreciate more, and it's just these characters that grow and grow over time. But then the biggest jump would be after the end of part 2, fast forward to the then current 1987, and introduce the first Japanese hero of the series, Jotaro. And part 3 is really where the series like hit its stride, not only with Jotaro, the very unique, specific, tough guy, kind of like Dirty Harry type hero, but also introducing stands, the psychic ability and projections that basically are kind of like mutant powers as well, if you want an equivalent to American comics. Or if you've played the Persona series, they're Personas because Personas ripped them off hardcore, right?
yeah. There's other energy buddies that you can, there's Scryed and a bunch of other random things, but let's just call it what it is. They're kind of like, they're Personas,
Yes, yeah. Stardust Crusaders was a huge hit. It inspired tons of video games at the time. If you now say were to read Stardust Crusaders or to watch the recent adaptation of it, not the OVA one, you'll see all these things that if you consumed Japanese video games that came out at the time, you'll be like, oh, that's where Street Fighter got this character from. That's where all this hard rock came from. This is where Alucard came from. All this stuff.
Benny Maru. JoJo has inspired countless video games over the years and designs, and quite frankly, anytime anyone in anything is doing a really dynamic pose that looks like their body is like bending and making weird angles, that's probably inspired by JoJo.
God, that's a great point. I mean, JoJo predates the fighting game boom by about half a decade. So, boy, yeah.
For example, Guile is based on the Nazi character from part 2 of JoJo, at least in design.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They just changed his tattoo, right?
Benny Maru from the King of Fighters games is exactly Polnareff.
Exactly.
Rose is exactly like Lisa. There's so much,
Yeah, and so it makes sense that then Capcom kind of pays it back, or in a way of making a JoJo fighting game based on part 3 as well, which I played years before I watched the anime or read part 3, and it was just the weirdest shit in the world to me when I saw it.
I kind of just shrugged at it like, am I supposed to know what this is? Like, someone help me out here.
Yeah, it's super confusing without context, and like especially when they brought that over and they actually translated it, but no one here knew what JoJo was, so there was no way to understand why or what these characters were supposed to be doing. It was a really strange decision, but
yeah, it kind of reminds me of Tatsunoko versus Capcom, in which I'm so glad they brought that over, but half of the characters I'm like, what is this? I don't have this in my brain.
To the material.
When you talk about the translation too, that's something else that got in the way of JoJo's localization officially, because most characters are named after famous rock bands that might sue over the use of their names in characters in it.
Yeah, you mentioned early on when you're profiling Araki that he's a fan of rock and roll. That is the understatement of the century. Literally, like all of his characters, there's a probably like 9 on 10 shot that they're named after a rock band or an artist. starting with Ronnie James Dio from
Yeah.
is from the beginning, moving forward in part one. In part two, you have the Pillar Men, Cars, AC/DC, Wham, Santana. By the time you get around to part three and beyond, where the stands and the spirit ghosts come in, every single stand is named after a band or a song.
Possibly a stupid question, but who are all the Joes named after in this series? Like,
The Joes are all original, but the main thing about them is that they need to either have the name Joe in their first and last name so that together it can be truncated to JoJo, or there's a kanji in their name that can be read as Joe so that the nickname JoJo makes sense. So that's the only convention with them.
Yeah, part 3 and part 4, in their first chapters, they both have a scene, at least in the localization, where a character says, "Oh, this kanji can be read also as Joe, so let's call him JoJo."
I really think Joey Jojo Jr. Shabadoo could live in this universe from The Simpsons.
Exactly.
It's the only place he belongs. No one would make fun of his name.
That stretch of the whole, like, oh, I can read a kanji in two different ways, that gets stretched even further as you go into the further parts. Like 5 has a pretty ridiculous reason for calling the character JoJo, but it's there, and we move forward and get even more absurd going forward.
I love a good kanji joke in my anime.
When we talk about the localization too, that is one reason. The dubs are very good, but a downside of the dub, and also what you'll read in the subtitles, is that they change it to the official translations. That's like, for example, Josuke is Crazy Diamond, but in the subtitles or in the dub, they will say Shining Diamond because they don't want to get sued over it. But if you're watching it subbed, you'll just hear them scream Crazy Diamond or Red Hot Chili Pepper. They'll just say it. So
yeah, it's great because the way they work around it it's really creative. Sometimes it's an in joke, sometimes it's different things. But like with the Pillar Men in part 2, they just worked around it by spelling out the sound effects. So Wham just became Whamu, and AC/DC became like ESIDISI. You know what I mean? Like SCDC. It just becomes a really weird, absurd thing. But yeah, they were really afraid of getting sued.
In terms of the animation in this, from the very beginning, I love the color choices in that there are no primary colors. It's all just like, I feel like they open up a bag of tropical Skittles to choose all these colors. It's like, there's no direct green. There's like neon green or yellow green. There's no direct blue or red. It's just like very interesting choices. It kind of looks like an episode of Futurama a bit.
Oh yeah.
Like the trees are purple.
That's specific to part 4, right?
Okay.
And a lot of that exists because part 4 in particular is trying to establish that the city, Morio, is as important a character as anyone else walking around it. And it's a very weird city. It's a very bizarre, quote unquote, city. So in every other part, you're going through real places, right? You're starting in England and you're just going to America, eventually Egypt, and they're world traveling in part 3. Morio chose a fictional city, and Araki wanted it to be a really distinct one. So yeah, the adaptation decided to make a lot of those colors strange and aggressive based on Araki's colored art of the city.
And they had to kind of pick and choose because the manga is black and white. It's not a color manga, though it's colorized now. Back then they were not, so they kind of just go with what feels right. Like I love Jotaro's white suit in this one. That's a really like bold choice, especially for a character who was in all black in part 3.
Well, the manga is black and white, but there are colored covers and color inserts for certain chapters. So it wasn't completely in the dark. Like a lot of the time when you're reading it in black and white, you come across like a color cover for whatever volume, and you see, okay, this time Araki wanted the character to be wearing like pink and purple and bright green because with yellow lipstick, because that's what he was digging that day. And you sort of get a feel for what the colors are as the volumes go on, you know? So there is a bit of a template, but it's ever changing and ever shifting because he colors the characters according to his mood.
And so part 3 is a huge hit, Stardust Crusaders. It ends, and it is wild to me that like part 3 ends, and then the next week, part 4 begins in Shonen Jump, May 4th, 1992. And like Willie said, they go from being a globe-trotting super adventure with all these wild, ostentatious powers to set in one small town for the entire part, and it is about the mundanities of life and the weirdness and this big time murder mystery. And then also, we can't talk about that without talking about Twin Peaks and how huge in Japan Twin Peaks was in 1992.
Hugely influential on a lot of people, I mean, making any sort of media, especially nerd media. Like, go back to Legend of Zelda. Link's Awakening is heavily influenced by Twin Peaks, as is Majora's Mask.
And all the way up to like Deadly Premonition about 10 years ago.
Exactly.
It was like kind of a direct ripoff
yeah.
until they had to change some things, actually.
Though, hey, don't believe me. Let's listen to what Entertainment Weekly in 1992 had to say about Japan's love of Twin Peaks.
But in Japan, there is full-fledged Twin Peaks mania. Everywhere you look, there are hats, buttons, books, and magazines. A 14-tape set of the entire Twin Peaks saga has sold more than 30,000 copies. And Japanese television carried mock Laura Palmer funerals, even though the series itself has only been seen on limited pay-per-view. Television producer Kenji Shumizu thinks he understands the fad.
The Japanese people seem to yearn for a mysterious atmosphere, which also characterizes, for example, the Twilight Zone.
Get a teenage boy to be the translator there. I trust Mary Hart, though.
Yeah. Yes, way bigger than even in America. Twin Peaks was a massive hit in Japan when it came back. Like Kyle MacLachlan starred in coffee commercials in Japan at the time. And when it just came back, it was a gigantic deal there as well. So if you know about Twin Peaks, then you can't not see its influence on the story of Morio in Diamond is Unbreakable.
Yeah, and you definitely, also can just see it as like Araki looking for a different feeling, a different vibe. We've gotten a vampire story. We've gotten a revenge, like Globetrotter story. We've gotten an Indiana Jones tale. So why not take a chance at a whodunit?
It's also lots of fun because this anime is from 2016 and the manga is from 92 to 95, but it takes place in 1999. So it's now a period piece instead of being a future story, which is great. And I was in high school in 99 too, so it's like I can identify with these characters.
It's really exciting seeing these parts get adapted because, again, for so long we've known, fans of the manga have known about like how cool these things are, and you kind of just want to tell the world about it, and like everyone's like, yeah, okay, you're crazy, whatever, man. And I'm like, no, but it's cool though, like one day, and like it's taken so long and so many years, but it's finally here. And when that first JoJo episode of the first part came out, the first thing you ever see when the adaptation occurred, and like we knew that the creator finally accepted and liked this adaptation. There's an early, like before the OVAs, there was an earlier JoJo movie that was terrible that no one talks about because it was so embarrassing it never got released.
Wow.
But the first thing you see in this new adaptation is pages of every single part from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And it was the director basically said, we wanted to promise everybody that we're going to get around to animating every single part. And that's the first thing you see. So it's just been a trip, and it's taking a solid decade to get there, but boy, is it exciting.
We talked about the OVA starting, like the 1993 OVA, which it's fun to return to, but I only watched it after I'd seen and then read all of part 3, so I could appreciate the OVA for what it was. But while the comic was still going on and has sold 100 million copies, it's one of the best-selling series in Shonen Jump history. It never really got a proper anime adaptation until the 25th anniversary of JoJo in 2012. That's when David Production announced it and started with parts 1 and 2 in season 1. Part 3 is a kind of 2-part season of 48 episodes. And then April 1st, 2016, Part 4 began, and it also really, I think, helped spread it in the West because it was getting finally simulcast too. Like, you kids today, you don't understand the beauty of simulcast, simul-subbed anime. I had to wait 6 months if I was lucky to see like Bubblegum Crisis 2048.
Now I have too much anime.
Back in my day, we were trading tapes uphill both ways.
We were talking about trading tapes today earlier at lunch, and yes, it was a sad life of waiting for your money order to not get stolen.
Yeah, absolutely. Not knowing what quality you're going to get when that tape arrives. What if like the final reveal is like blipped out by bad tracking.
That's how when I bought End of Evangelion, the fan sub of that, the guy promised like this is the best quality a VHS could be of this. This is not a copy of a copy. I promise. Send me that $40 money order in a self-addressed stamped envelope, and you will get this.
I never did that send us your tapes thing because then it's legal. I just said, take my money. I'm not sending you tapes.
Oh wow, I never did the send thing either.
The old JoJo OVAs, I think there's very few reasons to go back, but like there is some really interesting art direction choices. I don't know how much I'm allowed to spoil here. I don't know. I don't want to.
Let's not spoil too much, but yeah.
I was going to say that without spoiling. So there's stuff that's done artistically that's less faithful to the source material, but really cool as just to animation as a genre. They do some really cool things.
Yeah.
But otherwise the current anime is more faithful.
Yeah, Satoshi Kon, what I would figure were his moves in one of the final episodes with especially expressing Dio's stand in an animation way. I don't want to get too spoilery, but
exactly. Yes. That's what I'm trying to hint at. Exactly.
Yeah. And in case our listeners don't know what an OVA is, there used to be a huge thing in anime in which you would pay a lot of money for one episode if you lived in Japan. Usually they come out as a compilation here, but you pay like $50 to $60, sometimes more, for one episode, but it would be the best looking thing you'd ever seen, better than a movie. And boy, that era is over. Now I think they just give you OVAs if you buy the series. Like, okay, you bought the anime, you didn't steal it, here are some more episodes for you.
With porn in it.
Yes.
And all the nudity.
And I think this series has OVAs as well, part 4. I saw it has 2 OVAs. And
Kishibe, Rohan Adventures. That's true. They're OVAs based on these side stories books that came out, and they focus on Araki's. Basically, he says it's not a self-insert, but there's a manga author who's amazingly talented and super cool, everyone loves him. And these are side stories about this amazing manga author that's totally not Araki.
Yeah, it's such a self-insert. Like, there's that drawing I saw. It's an official drawing he did of himself hugging Rohan.
Wow.
But don't call it an insert, though. Yeah. No way.
I think he's earned it by now.
Well, Willie, one of my favorite insights you had into Araki was that he's like discovering his homosexuality over the course of 30 years, or at least figuring out his sexuality.
I think this series is homoerotic? That's bizarre.
No, I wouldn't say that.
Man, it is so cool. Like, the series, just like, the characters are just aggressively, their machismo is very, very aggressively homosexual, and it's awesome. They're so manly about everything, and also, like, they don't care about how flamboyant they're being and their fashion, whether it's lipstick or hearts or just the poses. Everything is amazing. And from part to part, the bit you're describing is something that we, on Best Friends, we were doing a playthrough of the JoJo Eyes of Heaven video game. And we were looking at the main characters of each part. We're like, okay, so we start with some fancy British lads, and then eventually he's like, okay, well, what about those American, like those American dandies, if you would? Oh, those are cool guys. All right, but I might have a taste for students. Some of those bad boys, like the thug style guys. Yeah, those guys are cool. All right, and then he has that one phase where he's like, what about, like, Italian guys? What about girls? Maybe not girls. And then he goes, how about sailors? Cowboys? Like, he throws it all in there. And you're like, wow, this dude is just figuring his tastes out. It's amazing.
What has has he made any comments about this, or have people asked him any questions about this? I'm just curious.
I don't think he's ever, like, commented on it, no. I mean, there's no real direct acknowledgement in any way.
Yeah.
In some ways, that's still something that, like, despite being okay, it's not very publicly discussed in Japan in some ways. But I think it's very obvious to anyone with eyeballs.
I'm not denying this.
Hey,
like,
man,
everything you're saying is on the page and in the anime. I'm just curious as if he knows about it. Like, I didn't know I was drawing that.
In an official capacity, like, no, but who knows, you know? Like, they don't... he gives a little insight to his life on the spines of his manga sometimes, but very little is known about a lot of Araki's life.
I do believe IRL he is married to a woman. But I should say, before we get into this episode 1 and 2 of part 4, we are recording this before part 5 comes out, but actually part 5 has just started. I'm really looking forward to it. Like, they took 2 years off, and I was honestly doubting, like, is this going to happen? Are they really going to, are they just not? Because part 5 is one of the less popular ones, isn't it, Wooly?
It's less popular in America. It's the most popular in Japan.
Oh.
And my suspicions are just based on the roster, because, what you get out of part 5 is more or less an Italian boy band in really tight leather. And I love it, but it's also, like, story-wise, it's a bit weaker, I will say. Plot-wise, it's definitely weaker than some of the other parts. In Japan, it was massively popular, and, like, they just loved those kids, and the boy band took off. So, like, yeah, one of the directors has been, like, excited to animate this part above all others, and has been on record saying that.
Will this be another 39 episode order, or
They haven't said how long, I don't think.
They're all pretty beefy. The boys and the episode orders.
David Productions, they don't skimp on this show either. Like, it is high quality animation by TV budget standards, I should say, not like theatrical, but it looks very good for current TV standards, I would say. And the opening theme, some of my favorite. I love all the OPs for the show. And meanwhile, for the ending themes, they pay real money for licensed songs. Savage Garden, yes, The Bangles.
Let's be honest, Savage Garden, not a lot of money. Well,
oh man,
that song started playing in the second episode that I watched, and I'm just like, this sounds a lot like, oh my god! And then the credit popped up. I'm like, it's like I'm being driven to the mall by my mom in 1998. That's what this feels like.
Exactly. Yes, that feeling is exactly what they wanted, because the music choices, right? So I Want You, Savage Garden, and then Walk Like an Egyptian, and everything going forward back to Roundabout in the first part. These were all the music that Araki was listening to while he was drawing the manga at the time. So it was all about capturing that era and, like, hopefully doing it with a song that thematically represents the story. And the Savage Garden feeling of 1999 is absolutely what they wanted you to feel.
I'm dying to know what they're going to go for with the end theme of part 5. I cannot wait.
Something evil is lurking in this town.
In a gruesome chain of horrific incidents, the death count has risen to 7.
A catastrophic danger is closing in as we speak.
What the hell? Who let you in here?
Great. I'm in the mood for a brawl.
Shining diamond! Back off if you know what's good for you!
This kid's power is unreal.
You think you've won, but he'll be here to butcher you into bloody pieces soon enough!
Who is he?
Oh, you'll find out. He's the one who gave me this power!
There's someone out there who can bestow the power of a stand?
My moment has finally arrived! Say goodbye to this world! You are not getting away!
If you want to piss me off, keep running!
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Diamond is Unbreakable. Premiering August 18th at 12:30. You and your prissy-ass hair are getting ripped apart! Huh?
What the hell did you just say about my hair?
Only Toonami on Adult Swim.
A fine duang to you all. It's me, Henry Gilbert, here, doing a reference Bob won't get.
A fine mahawk to you all. This is Bob Mackey doing a reference I think most of you will get.
And hey, thanks for listening to What a Cartoon this week with our awesome guest, Wooly from Super Best Friends. We really appreciate his JoJo expertise here on this one.
Yeah, be sure to check out all of his stuff. They've got YouTube videos and podcasts, all kinds of cool stuff going on there. Super Best Friends.
Yeah, and should have gone into it more, but his deconstructions of the openings of the JoJo series with Mother's Basement are so good. They are hyper spoilery, so only watch them if you have seen the show or don't care about spoilers for it, but they are really good as well. As long as I'm talking about cool things, you know, it's also cool. a Patreon for this podcast.
You don't say.
At patreon.com/Talking Simpsons, this show, What a Cartoon, and its sister show, Talking Simpsons, are supported by listeners like you. Listeners like you help us out with just $5 a month. It helps me and Bob do this full time, but it's not just about the money for us. You get so much for your $5. I really think we make it totally worth it.
That's true. So for $5 a month at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons, you get so many exclusive bonus podcasts, including the entire Talking Critic series. That's 23 episodes of Talking Critic that you might not have heard. Us going through the entire run of The Critic like we do with What a Cartoon and Talking Simpsons. Also, the entire first season of Talking Futurama. We go through all 13 episodes of Futurama in the first season. We also have bonus interviews with Simpsons writers and directors. We have end-of-season wrap-ups. We have deleted scene specials. We have a monthly community podcast where we answer your questions and comments, and we will occasionally just do fun bonus stuff for no real reason, just to entertain you. And if you sign up, you will not be disappointed. We have so much bonus stuff, especially if you haven't heard our bonus stuff yet. There's so much stuff waiting for you. And if you sign up, you get a nice little code. You drop that into whatever you use to listen to podcasts, and it will download our podcast as it downloads your regular non-Patreon podcast. It's so easy to fit us into your podcasting lifestyle.
So yes, that's patreon.com/Talking Simpsons. And also, if you haven't watched JoJo yet, and this chat about it really enticed you, you can see all of the JoJo television series at Verve. And you can sign up for a 30-day free trial of Verve through our link, and it helps out the show as well. It's vrv.co/WAC. That name again, Pop?
vrv.co/WAC.
And if you sign up there, you get access not just to Crunchyroll anime series like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, but tons of other shows. Previous What a Cartoon subject Freakazoid is on there. Cartoon Hangovers original content, including my favorite Bee and Puppy Cat, is on there. Even Nickelodeon classics from the 90s on Nick Splat are on there. And you can see it not just on streaming on your phone or tablet or computer, but also on game systems like the PlayStation 4. Verve is on there.
Frankly, there is a baffling amount of anime on that service. Almost too much.
You'll be drowning in anime.
Yes, divorce your wife or husband, leave your partner, and devote your life to anime on Verve.
It is the one true way. And you can sign up for it at vrv.co/WAC. And now, back to the rest of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Let's get right into this episode then. Well, part 4, I wanted to do part 4 also just because I love the supporting cast in part. So I only know parts 1 through 4. I've only seen what was anime and then read back in the manga, but I really do love the cast of characters in this one. Okuyasu, Koichi, especially Rohan. They are such cool supporting characters in this.
They really are, and I feel like everyone gets their due, even like early on, and just I'm just thinking about like how great those intros are. And as a side note, like JoJo as an entire series, the intros to each of these parts and four intros in particular are some of the strongest in all of anime, to the point where like I've checked out and done breakdown videos with this Mother's Basement, a friend of mine, where
those are really great.
Frame by frame, you can analyze and see the meaning that's put into each intro and how much it foreshadows like the story and the cast and what's happening. And the strong cast of part 4 is given some of the best foreshadowing ever in the Part 4 intros.
I know I've only seen a bit of it, but in the first episode, I was sort of expecting Koichi to be the quote-unquote normal character that we see this absurd world through his eyes, but he kind of disappears. I'm sure he comes back and more things are done with him, but I just was sort of expecting something different, but I did really enjoy what I watched.
An interesting thing about that first episode, too, is the cold open. It starts out with just a scene of, like, breakfast being cooked in a wholesome way in a wholesome town, and then it kind of zooms out to reveal that the hand that was cooking breakfast is a severed lady's hand, and we don't know what the deal is with that. That whole scene was actually added just for the anime. It was not in the original manga because the Araki didn't know who the villain was going to be at the time, but that insert sets off Part 4 in such a great way. It's a really good cold feel opening to this new part.
Yeah, it really sets the mood. I was not expecting the pullback to reveal a severed hand that could never eat that delicious breakfast. It looks so good.
Yeah, part these episodes cover the first 4 chapters of the manga, and I would say it's 95%, even 97% the exact same. But the additions they make, like that intro, only improve the story. Like it does foreshadowing that the manga couldn't do because he was writing it week to week, and so he didn't know who, I'm not going to say his name, but they didn't know who the big bad was going to be when he started it. And the big bad rules in this. Like, he's such a cool guy.
Araki requested that intro as well. Like that new scene was his choice.
That makes that's even better. I would think they wouldn't make too many changes to it without his permission. And that's also when we get to hear the wonderful Morio radio tune too. Let's see. I want to play it again.
Good morning. Ohayou gozaimasu. Moriocho Radio.
Oh, so great.
Did someone send me a text? Because that's my phone's ringtone.
Wow.
You just played right there.
I also like the Japanese/country fusion song they play over the breakfast scene. It's very catchy and cute.
And also, like, a severed hand cooking breakfast that is such a, like, Lynchian kind of detail, too. Like, it really...
Yes.
It's like you'd see in, say, Blue Velvet, or not just Twin Peaks. Like, Lynch in general is all about finding the horrors in regular life. And there's so many great moments in this episode like that, too. The episode kind of begins in earnest and with basically a torch passing from Jotaro to Josuke as the lead character. You've got Jotaro, who's now been it's been 10 years since he's really used his stand. I think Araki said that it was like he was out of shape pretty much. He just hadn't been using it. So that's why he was like at godlike power at the end of Part 3, and now he's kind of toned it down a bit since then.
Fortunately, it's still such a broken power that he can solve his problems using it, but he's definitely, hasn't worked out that muscle in a while. The interesting thing about the passing of the torch, too, is that that's something that every part does, is that opening scene has to really establish the character and set them up in a way. And I feel like Josuke, who happens to be my favorite protagonist in the JoJo franchise, he really, in that scene with the turtle, he basically gives you his resume.
It's true.
It establishes everything. Yeah.
And it's a great, it's also feels like a reference to that old Japanese fairy tale, Urashima Taro, of the man saving the turtle. Like in Western script writing parlance, there's the term save the cat. This is more of a save the turtle kind of moment.
I was glad because any sort of animal cruelty really breaks my heart. And I was like, I hope that turtle's okay.
Well, Bob,
oh no. Well, I mean, there's more cruelty in the show towards humans than I was expecting, but...
Yeah, I'm just going to warn you, Bob, that JoJo it wouldn't be JoJo if animals weren't killed a lot.
That's good to know ahead of time. But so Josuke...
the kitten test is failed aggressively by JoJo.
Okay, I got to psych myself up. But Josuke is made fun of a lot for his hair, his famous... Well, I mean, the hairstyle is famous. It's the Yankee hairstyle that juvenile delinquents wore in Japan. And by 99, woefully out of date. Probably by 92 was sort of out of date, too. I think it was more of an 80s, 70s thing.
Yeah, and Jotaro is like the callback to the previous generation's punk as well. And it's kind of like the old punk has grown up and now he's seeing these new punks today. And I also love that Jotaro has like world conquering powers. You don't know this, Bob, but Jotaro can stop time. He could rule the world, but he is getting a PhD in marine biology. That's what he's doing.
And he loves the dolphins, man. And only that, but he's like you said, he's an old style thug. He's a bancho, right? Well, what they were back in Japan, and the big Yankee hair bouffant thing is basically you can still see it nowadays if you go into certain parks where they have older guys celebrating that hairstyle, but it's absolutely two styles of thugs sizing each other up.
Yeah, and Josuke even has the different uniform, the different sort of thug punk uniform you'd see if you play the River City Ransom Japanese games.
Yeah, the bancho outfit, absolutely.
And that's a real difference too in Josuke to Jotaro is Josuke at first, when he's getting bullied, is very agreeable. He's like, okay, I'll take off my shirt and pants. You're right, senpai. Only he snaps when somebody makes fun of his hair. They make a point of saying he's both goofy and dangerous. And that kind of that's a theme of the whole world of Morio, I would say.
He's got a real Marty McFly complex where one thing sets him off, but only in the second and third movies.
Oh my God, you're right. That is so Marty McFly.
And it's funny in the sense that, the first Jonathan Joestar, the first JoJo, and Jotaro are very serious, icy blue Oni type, protagonists. Whereas the second and fourth here, Josuke and his dad are both wild card, red, fiery, kind of nutty protagonists. And I think one thing that establishes just how insane it is within that first scene, Josuke gets an explanation for what this crazy ghost he's been possessed with for his entire life actually is. Jotaro says, hey, there's stands and you can see them. And he shows him that I'm another person like you. And Josuke doesn't even care. He couldn't even be bothered. He's like, oh, that's a mystery of my life. Oh, that's cool. I'm still going to punch you now.
Yeah. And even when his blood rage goes away and his fight's over, he's still like, ooh, commencement at school, gotta go. It's your life has been changed. You're told that who your father is and that you're going to inherit a bunch of money from him, and you have a psychic ability almost no one on earth has, but I'm a freshman in high school. I got to get out of here.
A nice touch is that Josuke apologizes when he finds out he's an illegitimate child. He's like, I don't want to bring shame upon my family.
Yes. And then ultimately rejects the proposition because, and I'm going to underline this statement verbally if I can, it turns out that Josuke just wants a peaceful life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
if you know what the reference is. There.
Oh yeah, I do. Bob.
I don't, but he's got a nice house in the suburbs. So
one thing you'll lose in the dub, another pro for the sub, is when Josuke is getting threatened by the punks, and he says his hair looks like Astro Boy. They actually subtitle it to say Astro Boy, but they lose the Astro Boy and Saze-san references in there, which localization is important, but. This is in these cases, I like that they kept it because this is so specifically set in 1999 Japan that I think you need those kind of Japanese specifics in it as well.
For the time, right? Yeah.
So he finds out who he is, and they have even a kind of American comic style hero versus hero fight that is just kind of brief to show you what Josuke's deal is. And that Josuke is basically he has Christ-like powers, honestly.
Yeah, well, have we mentioned what his power? I guess he can freeze time, right?
No.
Oh, that's Jotaro.
No.
Yeah. Okay, so Josuke can break things and also reshape them.
He can repair anything. Yeah. That includes healing people.
And you see that a lot in these first two episodes of punching through innocent people and then repairing them.
Yeah. For the sake of making sense of it, he can return things to their original state. That's the specifics of it, and that's the rule, quote unquote. It's more precise than healing even.
Yeah, I mean, but does he fuck up the bully's face and
he can
puts his nose in a different place?
He wants.
Yeah,
if he wants to.
Exactly.
But he's also, if he just wants to punch somebody, he can do pretty darn well in combat too. But it's also that he can heal stuff, and that, as Wooly, I'm sure would attest to, a huge part of JoJo is the rules and then finding ways around it. Every fight is an introduction of a set of rules of what a stand can do, and then it is a clever way of getting around those rules.
It's the single most interesting thing about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and it's the reason why it's worth watching, and the reason why it stands apart from, let's say, Dragon Ball, or One Piece. No, I wouldn't say One Piece, sorry. I don't really know One Piece that well. I meant to say something like Bleach, or any show where it's just a bunch of characters kind of powering up and trying to defeat each other with bigger numbers. JoJo has nothing to do with numbers, and it really introduces people that have to kind of fight each other or figure out how to solve their problems with a set of hard, specific rules that the characters are learning on the fly and then have to outthink each other. So the fights are not scraps, they're problem solving.
Yeah, actually, I was going to bring up One Piece earlier. This reminds me a lot of One Piece to an even higher extreme, because in One Piece, it's very specific powers in very specific places and lots of rules. But with this, it's even more granular. And I like that we'll see in episode 2 where you're doing the fighting matters as much as the powers. Like, that adds new things to the equation. And it's different than Dragon Ball, in which you're like in a blasted chasm or an arena, and there's not a lot of things affecting the fights. Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Yeah, absolutely. It also, in that first episode, like, the scene cuts away to introduce your protagonist's family, and you kind of go, I wonder where he got that temper from. And then you spend 5 seconds with his mother and you go, holy shit, okay.
Tomoko is great, and I love that just the introduction of, well, then go to hell by yourself, smash, and it smashes his face into the thing. It's so great.
Vertically into a partially exposed convertible window. Like, it's the most painful way to smash someone's head into a glass.
Should have cut the top of his head off or something.
And then the cop is just like, well, you did call my daughter a bitch. Fuck you. Like, Ryohei is great too.
And that's the quaint town. That's the quaint town of Moriocho. You know?
Tomoko is, I kind of wish we'd gotten more of Tomoko. And meanwhile, Ryohei, you basically get like 8 pages with him at most. And no, not even 8, more like 5 pages in the comics before he gets Uncle Bend. But
if you're a fan of Ryohei in particular, so I don't know if you've heard of the live action movie that came out for part 4, but there is a Diamond is Unbreakable movie, and it's this weird adaptation that's somewhat self-contained, and it does its best here and there. But the best thing it does and changes is that the grandfather gets a lot more significance and importance and plays a bigger role. And it works out really well for establishing Josuke as a character. Because, in these first 2 episodes, what you kind of see is the grandfather is the reason why Josuke is a moral, upstanding person. He kind of grew up in a single-parent household. He didn't have the same upbringing that the other protagonists have had. But his grandfather is such a pillar of the city, and he's such a great person as a cop that he clearly helped raise him into being a really good guy. And you get to see more of that and understand a lot of it in the live action film.
That's good. Even in this, they make it clear that, like, Josuke is a punk with a heart of gold. He'll end up doing the right thing. He will sometimes be lazy or just want to play video games instead of going to school, but he will do the right thing. Like, that's what's so, there's multiple moments in here where when he could have ignored a problem, he immediately gets into it. It's like when the guy who gets possessed by Aqua Necklace, he does the right thing. Like, he saves that woman. It's shocking to see him just punch a hole through a woman and to save her.
Yeah.
But that's what he does.
And I also think the grandfather character is good in establishing just how this town is not ready for these outlandish things to happen within it, because the best cop is this old man on a bike. He doesn't even have a real gun. He's got a model gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and Angelo, he is one of the most fucked up people in JoJo history, I think. Like, he's just made to be incredibly detestable. Like, this actually gave me, Wooly, you know how other JoJo antagonists are treated. This was my first full episode of JoJo I watched, so I figured, they're all going to end with JoJo murdering or basically killing his nemesis. But really, the point of JoJo is that he befriends 90% of the people who want to kill him.
A whole lot of it, yeah. The purpose of Angelo is actually to just to really establish, again, you're establishing Josuke. Now let's establish what he does under pressure. And you introduce an almost like 2D cardboard cutout of evil. Really, especially the beginning of the second episode, they spend like maybe 2 minutes just listing off his crimes and going, yeah, this guy's awful. He's a piece of shit. He's an absolute irredeemable piece of shit. And now Jotaro and Josuke have to figure out what to do about that. And like, it's kind of nuts because the process of problem solving there, you get to see how resourceful Josuke is with his ability, despite the fact that he's kind of just never had any major serious problems. He's kind of figuring this all out for the first time.
I like this first villain a lot because I think the sins he's committed, the crimes he's committed, are very like understandable on a human scale. It's not like he blew up a planet or destroyed a country. It's like these are things that you would recognize like in the real world. Like, oh, that guy's a monster. You know, it's like it's on the scale that you can recognize it from your human perspective.
Continues to do those things in the episode.
Yeah,
too.
Yeah. Like you said, well, he kind of reframes the threat level as well, because in the previous story, Dio was a would-be world conqueror. Like, he dreamed of conquering the world. That's not what Angelo or really any of the villains in this want to do. And then later villains want to do even more than control the world. They want to change all of space and time. Oppositely, you have guys like Angelo who are just like, I want to walk around Japan and murder who I feel like. That's all his evil plans amount to.
And one of the really important things too, I feel, is that, well, I mean, it's ultimately kind of fast forwarding to the resolution of Angelo. But when Dio and Jotaro confronted each other, and Jotaro kind of like talks him down and says like, you pissed me off, that was your one mistake. Like, up to that point, you've had Jotaro's morality established, and in the beginning of when they're establishing Jotaro, he has a moment where he goes, because no one can see your stand or its ability, then my stand will be the judge for your crimes, right?
Yeah.
So there's a moment where Angelo goes, you can't judge me, what are you gonna do? Oh, kill me? What is it? And it's basically the same question that Jotaro had to answer at the beginning of his story. Josuke now has to answer it, but he gives a completely different route.
Yeah, and Jotaro even has the line of just like, you know what, I'll leave this up to you, Josuke. Him basically saying, you're the main character of this, so I'll let you decide. I wonder, too, if that was, in the manga especially, the way of telling readers, like, I know you guys still love Jotaro, but he's a side character in this, and he's going to spend a lot of this story in a hotel. He's not going to be doing stuff.
That's a nice hotel room, too. Wow.
He's got that Joestar money.
Yeah.
But it makes sense too when Josuke says, I'll leave this up to you, because the thing right before that moment, like Josuke said, he answers him, he says, you're not going to be executed and you're not going to be returned to jail, and so Jotaro in that moment probably went, okay, so this kid, I don't know much about him, but just based on that, I feel like I can trust his decisions here. And he says, all right, I'll leave it up to you, because he's established I'm not just going to murder this guy in cold blood. I'm going to, he's going to figure it out some other way. And boy, does Angelo get it.
He's got a strong sense of justice. I have to say, this Angelo, he infiltrates suburbia basically to kill Josuke. It really reminded me of Terminator 2 in a way.
Yeah.
In that it's like an overpowered like super creep going in disguise as like familiar people in order to kill one target. And I know Terminator 2 came out a year before this. Maybe there was an influence, maybe not, but I definitely got some vibes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, well, Terminator as well, you could, in a concurrent anime and Dragon Ball, you wouldn't have the Android Saga without Terminator. Like, Terminator was a huge deal.
It's great. If you read the manga Parasite, it's so good.
Oh, yes. Yep. Love that.
I love, the author is like a huge lefty in terms of like environmentalism and politics. And in throughout the series, about the midway point when Terminator 2 comes out or towards the end, he says, James Cameron ripped me off. Like, I was doing all of this stuff and James Cameron ripped me off. And knowing what James Cameron, he loves manga, he loves anime, I know what happened. It's not just conjecture.
So the first fight that you kind of see like that they have to solve here with Aqua Necklace in the house is a great introduction to like the puzzle solving that you're going to have in JoJo, because part 3 kind of started with a couple of like mano a mano stare downs, and then eventually it gave more weight to those puzzles. And here the first thing that Josuke has to solve is the equivalent of an end of part 3 puzzle, this water-based stand that you can't quite tell where it's going to be and how to stop it. You've got to think clever, and you've got to swallow a plastic glove.
Yeah.
Well, when he first fights him and catches him kind of easily because Angelo underestimates him, and he's able to just punch a hole through his mom and put him in a glass container.
Punch a broken bottle through his mom.
Yes, yeah. That he does all that, and then Josuke thinks he's figured out the puzzle, and he gets distracted, plays his N64, which in the comic it's a super...
Jotaro on hold on the phone solves the problem and goes back to the phone.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, what's the villain? What's he up to? Oh, yeah, okay, done. What were you saying?
Yeah, this is that. Like after what happened, I was like, you should have kept that thing in your pockets.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, because he's a cocky kid.
Yeah.
As Angelo tells him, don't get cocky in a Han Solo type way. But also in the comic, he's playing Super Famicom, but because they actually made it a 1999 video game system in N64, which, I'm glad they did that instead of a PlayStation. PlayStation would have been the obvious one. N64, I think that's a more bizarre specific, really. Slight tangent, I just watched Perfect Blue again recently, and I forgot, like, in multiple apartments when they just have, like, apartment dressing of what's next to your TV, PlayStations, just original PlayStations just drawn in there. Was that ubiquitous?
Yeah, I think that's a Japanese household, back around that time, circa 1999.
Or an old sponsorship we don't know about.
Could have been a Sony sponsorship. That's true.
Like all the Sega Saturns in Evangelion.
I would think in 2014 they love playing their Sega Saturn.
Shinji was a real retro gamer. We're all big losers like him.
Yeah, then his Uncle Ben gets killed, and that teaches him that's another rules-based thing too. It shows you that he can't bring back people from the dead, and they immediately also have to tell you he can't heal himself. So it shows you his limitations.
He can't heal himself. That's a great rule. But the whole Jotaro standing there going, "Hey, once a life is taken, no one can bring it back, not even a stand." And it's like, just cut to Jotaro standing there while his grandfather comes back. He's being an asshole because he's literally had the exact same scenario happen, except the dude did come back from the dead. Jotaro's a jerk.
Like, if you were reading that in the manga, literally 4 weeks ago, you saw a grandfather get brought back to life.
Wow, that's awesome context that I had no idea existed. But
hey man, people die when they're killed.
It's a good lesson for real life too. But so Angelo, the evil murderer / rapist / Aqua Necklace having dude, there's a lot of comedy of him just waiting up in a tree like, "Oh, I'll get you, Josuke." Also, Aqua Necklace is his stand. Is that a reference to something? It's very odd. Something that's called Aqua Necklace.
It's a reference to the Asia album Aqua, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Also, the setting of 1999 is a Prince reference, too.
Oh, damn.
And also Josuke's purple outfit and his kind of look is a bit Princey.
Yeah, I can see that.
Too. Around the scene, too, the part where Jotaro goes from his hotel room direct to the taxi, I think it was Super Eye Patch Wolf who pointed out in his review of it of like, that is such an amazing cut of like, he puts down the phone and then he's immediately in his taxi. Like, it's such a cool editing there.
I mean, we've been kind of like glossing over it, but I've been definitely chomping at the bit for like some of the direction and little nods and things they do in this is brilliant, especially in terms of just like setting up the rest of the series. When the first shot after the introduction in part 1, Jotaro's in the taxi coming by, and then they drive by a tower. And then the taxi driver remarks, he goes, "Hey, we get a lot of better reception when I drive by that tower." Anyway, and you're looking at Superfly right there. Like they're calling it from the get-go.
I love little things like that. And the intro, like you said, is so dense. Even in this viewing of it, I paused. It was like, oh, wow, there's that. Like all these things.
Okay, you did. Yeah. It's kind of insane how much the first intro, like not even getting into the others, but just the first one, like it's dancey, it's happy, it's establishing this crazy, noisy, bizarre town, but you're seeing like the hints of like who the enemies are going to be in the clouds and things. But the first thing they do when these characters show up is they do that disco point,
Mm-hmm.
And then again, we see like Jotaro in the town looking up, he's pointing. And then the last thing in that intro, again, they're pointing and they're trying to establish something, that pointing has a really good reason for it, but it seems to just kind of be a loose, fun thing, but it's not until you come back to the end of the story that you understand why they're pointing and what that's supposed to be.
It's really good at straddling. David Production in general is so good at straddling the line of making references that the hardcore fans will understand while also not spoiling the story for new viewers of it, like me and Bob when we started with part 4. So it's really good at that.
Mm-hmm. I have to say, I looked up Studio David. I didn't know what they worked on before this. Apparently, they're made up of old Studio Gonzo folks. And Gonzo was pretty big in the late 90s, early 2000s. I think it's defunct now, but they did things like Hellsing. That's all I can think of now.
Gonzo was one of the like I'd say like gods of anime alongside, Madhouse and 4C and some of those others as well.
Yeah, former Gainax people established Gonzo, so it's a long chain of animators.
It all just comes straight from like 8 of my favorite places, like Production IG too. It's like they're almost all these people who get fed up at Gainax and start their own studio, or TMS, one of those two. So right before the big fight with Angelo, after the death of Ryohei, I love that you see that like Josuke's trying to keep cool and just constantly combing his hair, but then you see that he's like misshapen half of the house just out of rage, like he's so
nice
angry.
Dolly-esque furniture strewn around the house. Yeah, he's reformed it.
We get to see Jotaro and Josuke hang out as they plan their battle with Angelo in the house. We get to hear another like yare yare daze, which is, or here it is, Jotaro's catchphrase.
Yare yare. Mendou kusai koto ni naranakia ii kana.
So manly.
He's a tough guy.
I guess we forgot to mention that like Jotaro wants to know like why is Angelo waiting so long to attack, and then it starts raining. He's like, oh shit, he can move through the water. So now they're trapped in the house, and where they can go in the house starts shrinking as the water starts getting in.
Has never been scarier either.
A humidifier has never been more terrifying.
And it's a great line that like Jotaro says of like, I gotta admit, I kind of underestimated this guy, that he didn't realize that a water-based enemy could be so hard, because he fought all these crazy assholes in part 3, but none of them were like liquid that he couldn't punch. Like punching it doesn't do shit to it.
Super not true, and I'm calling you out for
it. Okay,
all
right, you're right. He did. You're right.
Because Newell in the desert is an old blind man, and he is controlling a stand that is literally just water.
Yeah,
it's probably the hardest fight and one of the coolest fights that Jotaro has, where it's a sound-based like thing, and like he has to fight this thing of water, and it's so hard, but he does it. And that was the end level fights of what Jotaro had to do to solve part 3's problem. And that's why it's like to take one of those end level bosses and make it the first challenge for Josuke. It's really nuts to show you, okay, this guy's really good.
Josuke wins the fight. This is another JoJo truism, is that he tries to do the broken glass thing again on him, but the rule in the JoJo world is no trick works twice. You can you're asking to lose if you try to use the same trick again.
Yeah, Aqua Necklace is steam, so you can't trap him in the bottle.
Yeah. You also get the introduction to Josuke's catchphrase, because as you mentioned, you got the Jotaro yare yare, good grief. And the Josuke version is great.
Yep. Here, let's hear it one more time. I love it. Like, that's just great.
You're speaking of fan subs earlier. When I was getting Dragon Ball Z fan subs in the 90s, they would have Frosted Flakes commercials, and Tony the Tiger would say "Gureto." So that's not a joke. He really did that in Japanese.
Yeah.
Speaking of good voice acting, I also really love Angelo's Seiru is really good. I love his laughing here in this when he thinks, this is another thing in JoJo. If you start bragging that you've definitely won and like, I've already won, it's all over. Ha ha ha. You have lost. You have already lost. But his laughter here is really good acting. Because he's certain he's won. He's like, yeah, I can't stop myself from laughing. And then meanwhile, Josuke's like, no, I keep a cool hand even when I win, like right now.
Isn't Angelo the guy who said don't get cocky to everybody?
He did, yeah. The Dr. Heal Thyself thing.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
And when he gets caught here too, I love this. Like, once you've got your stand, then you basically can control. If you've got a stand in your hand, you can kind of control the guy like a puppet in some cases. Love his reaction to getting caught here too. He's fucked, man. It's so satisfying every time. It's kind of formulaic, but every time once the JoJo characters, one of the JoJo heroes is winning, and the music kicks in of like, it's like, the good guys are winning.
Break down.
So after they capture Angelo's stand, I guess he's still kind of powerful, but not powerful enough to fight Jotaro and Josuke, so he runs away. And then instead of killing him, Josuke sort of just traps him into a rock. He beats up Angelo with a rock behind him and sort of reforms the rock around him. He becomes a landmark in the town. And I was like, well, he's got to starve to death at some point, right? or die of exposure.
He doesn't need it anymore.
Okay, I didn't know stands keep you sustained or whatever.
Yeah, well, he basically becomes the living rock, if you would.
Yeah.
And he's in a tortured state of forever being conscious, but also immobile.
It's pretty horrible, though deserving for what he did.
That's true, yeah. They made his crimes severe enough where you're like, well, that's hell on earth, but that's what he deserves.
You know, it kind of reminds me of in American comics, like, say, The Flash or Superman. They make these rules of like, well, the hero can't kill. And so instead, Superman will put someone in a state of living death in the Phantom Zone, but he technically didn't kill them. And this is kind of the same deal.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, to be honest, like, the villain of part 2 suffers a similar fate.
Oh, yeah.
And it's so nuts because, like, it takes the time to establish how bad it is when you are isolated. He basically floats off into space and is forever just immobile and unable to do anything about it. And he's in an immortal body. So because he can't die, it's like the villain it says that eventually he just stopped thinking. And it's like, it's such a horrifying concept. And it's like, he barely deserved it compared to Angelo. You know?
No, the Araki is so good at getting specific on fates worse than death. Like, you're like, oh man, I kind of wish I just got killed. Like, the lucky guys are the ones who died in this one. So that's where episode 2 ends, and that it, like I said, pretty much exactly the first 4 parts of the comic series as well, and it just kind of goes from there. I think, you know, in my opinion, I think listeners, if you wanted to just start with part 1, if you didn't want to watch, if you don't have the time to put in the 75 episodes before this, even though I think you'll have a great time, I think you could just stick with part 4 all the way through and then go back to the beginning as I did. And I still think that's a good experience. But starting from part 1, I think is also good.
If you have time, I would say start from part 1 if you can. But I started at part 4 and I got a ton out of it. This added context is helpful, but it's not necessary. It's still, I think it still knows some people watching this are new, even though it's following the manga pretty faithfully. I think even the manga author was just like, well, I don't know if everyone's going to read the previous 50 volumes, so I have to catch people up in some way, you know?
I can't endorse skipping parts. It would hurt me if I did.
Okay. But time is there's not enough time.
Believe me, I know. Trust me. As someone who's like I consume a lot, and there's always more suggestions coming in, and my list is forever growing. I understand the struggle.
But first read all 120 books, and then you can watch the anime if you want to be truly faithful.
No. It's like the JoJo is thankfully, like, it's self-contained in a way where it's more forgiving about skipping than other things are. But man, oh man, is it so worth it, you know? But regardless, it's opinions, you know?
Yeah, and few anime fighting series have the benefit of doing something, doing an adaptation after the original source material has ended. So there's no worry of like, oh, we're going to catch up to the manga. Oh shit. Oh, well, what do we do? Slow things down. They have their roadmap printed out like way ahead of time. So that's so great for them.
It is, and it's also painful because we know how long it's going to take because they're so good with these animations, like. The evolution of like how the studios has gotten better over time is like, it means we're only going to get to part 7 in like 10 years from now. And there's some cool stuff I want to talk to you guys about in part 7, but
well, hopefully we won't be
to get there.
Hopefully we won't be literally underwater by then. Hoping that ozone layer holds out.
We gotta hope. Just take care of the Earth just so we can get to part 7 in animation.
Absolutely. That's the main reason to keep the Earth going.
Do your part.
More JoJo.
And do your part and flush some ice cubes down the toilet every day. Help cool things down a bit.
Well, thanks so much for joining us, Wooly. Is there anything you'd like to promote?
Yeah, where can we find you?
Well, yeah, again, like I said, if you're into dick jokes over video games, you can come check us out at Super Best Friends Play, or check me out on Wooly Versus and the podcast that we do. Generally, we cover video games. We're pretty big on fighting games, but we cover all genres and whatnot. That's over at superbestfriendcast.com.
And I would also suggest from your videos, for our listeners who are big animation fans, your history of Reboot and the reboot of Reboot is so good. I learned a ton of stuff because I was a casual Reboot viewer at best. So that was a really good one.
Thank you. Yeah, I did a eulogy for the show Reboot, basically. That was a lot of fun. And the Kirby lore videos are a new fun one too. If you thought Kirby was just a little pink cream puff, you're right. But also, there's Eldritch Demon Gods. So I get into that.
Awesome.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for joining us, Wooly.
No problem. Thanks for having me on, guys.
So thanks again to our guest, Wooly. And if you want to watch JoJo, there's a lot of it, and you can watch it all on the Verve streaming network. And we have a special code that will let you get a 30-day free trial and give a little money back to your friends at What a Cartoon and Talking Simpsons. Henry, how does that work?
If you go to verve.co/WAC, that's vrv.co/whack, you can sign up for a 30-day free trial of the service, and that'll not only get you access to all the Crunchyroll anime, which includes JoJo, and the Funimation anime as well, you can get access to their exclusives, like they have Freakazoid, a previous subject of What a Cartoon, and Nick Splat, which has tons of classic 90s Nickelodeon content, including, say, Ah Real Monsters and Guts.
Ooh, I'm sure we'll cover all of those, but not Guts.
No.
We have not started that podcast yet.
That'll be a low, scraping the bottom of the barrel when we get to
Gavin Bout Guts coming in 2020.
Let's hear from Mo. But yeah, so go
Scared me.
I was feeling the guts. But go to vrv.co/WAC to sign up for that 30-day free trial on us.
And as for us, all the stuff that we do is funded by the Talking Simpsons Patreon. If you go to patreon.com/Talking Simpsons, you can help support our show and get some cool bonus podcasts. We've got so many things waiting for you there, probably close to 100 at this point. But Henry, can you please tell our listeners, what are the two newest pieces of bonus content that you can only hear as a $5 level subscriber to patreon.com/Talking Simpsons?
Well, I would throw people to our most recent interviews that we did on the subject of The Simpsons. We talked with Mark Kirkland, who has directed more episodes of The Simpsons than anybody, and he tells us about his time not only on the 30 years of Simpsons, but also how he got his start in classic Hanna-Barbera animation in the late 70s, working with folks like Alex Toth and even Tex Avery. Also, we have an interview with Josh Weinstein, not only the co-executive producer and showrunner of seasons 7 and 8 of The Simpsons, but co-executive producer and showrunner on Disenchantment and also Mission Hill. So you should check out both of those. And at the $10 level, you can get access to a ton of exclusive videos, like us going through the deleted season of seasons 5, 6, 7 of The Simpsons, as well as the first season of Futurama. Check all of that out at patreon.com/Talking Simpsons.
As for me, I've been one of your hosts, Bob Mackey. You can find me on Twitter as Bob Servo. My other podcast is Retronauts. It's a classic gaming podcast. It's been going on since 2006. I recommend you go to retronauts.com or look up Retronauts in your podcast machine and find a topic that interests you. Download that episode and subscribe if you like it. I think you will. Henry, where can we find you?
I am HENREYG on Twitter. You follow me there, you'll get updates on all the new stuff that we do on this podcast, as well as when new exclusives go live. And other thoughts, you'll probably see me tweeting my thoughts about the new season of JoJo Part 5 as well, if you just follow me at HENEREYG.
Thank you so much for joining us, folks. We'll see you next time for the House of Mouse episode, Jiminy Cricket. We'll see you then.
Let the joy of love give you an answer. 別れの時さえ砕けぬ石で1999 Peace and Summer 自分の乗り越え掴み取れ未来交わす勇気が生まさ
HIT